Hello, and thank you for joining us today for another episode of Things to Know Right Now with Parkinson's Resource Organization. My name is Eileen Lynch. I am the Executive Director of Parkinson's Resource Organization. And if this is the first you are joining us, welcome. We post videos like this where we discuss all things Parkinson's. So with us today is Dr. Mark Hasegawa-Johnson and Clarion Mendes of the University of Illinois' Beckman Institute, and they are here to discuss the Speech Accessibility Program. What is it? How can it improve quality of life? And how can you be part of this project? So welcome, Clarion and Mark. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for the invitation, Eileen.
Of course, it's wonderful to have both of you. So why don't we just start at the beginning? How did both of you become interested in speech and assistive technology? And Clarion, let's start with you.
Absolutely. So I've been a speech language pathologist since 2009, and I've always been drawn to the Medicare crowd. I know that there's plenty of folks with Parkinson's disease that are quite a bit younger than that, but I've always been drawn to working with older adults, and I worked primarily in skilled nursing facilities as well as acute care, and a lot of my patient population, of course, had Parkinson's disease. And something that individuals brought up time and time again was the desire to have tools to be able to age in place and for their tools to help their disease progress in such a way that they could still be at home and enjoying time with family, leisure pursuits, vocational activities, that kind of thing. And so that's always been part of my core as a speech language pathologist, but I actually have to credit Mark with inspiring me to think about it from the standpoint of speech recognition technology. So I give him credit for that for sure.
Well, Mark, why don't you tell us where your interest started?
Right. Well, my interest started while I was working on my PhD. In the early 1990s, there was speech recognition technology available, but not very many people were using it. And in fact, people with dysarthria, people with reduced intelligibility as a result of neuromotor disorders, were among the power users of this technology in the early 1990s. There were people who would spend hours and hours training a personalized automatic speech recognizer so that they could use that as their primary human-computer interface. And one of those projects, training a personalized speech recognizer, was actually the doctoral thesis of my office mate when I was studying for my PhD. And so because I saw this fantastic success story while I was working on my doctorate, when I first came to Illinois, I reached out to people in the Department of Speech and Hearing Sciences to where Clarion is to try to see what I could do that would be useful to, that would help to advance accessibility for people with neuromotor disorders. And I worked with Dr. Adrian Perlman, who was a professor at the time and later became the head of that department, to collect a very small corpus of speech of people with dysarthria. And we've been doing, we and many other laboratories around the world have been doing research on that very small corpus of 16 people for the past 20 years. Wow. And so the original impetus of the Speech Accessibility Project was that I wanted to kind of bring that research into the 2020s. I wanted to make it possible to get the kinds of very low speech recognition error rates that other users are enjoying, to make those available to people with dysarthria. In a way, this goes back to the small corpus that I described. We in 2008, Dr. Adrian Perlman and Dr. Hee-Jin Kim and I collected a small database of people with dysarthria, of the speech of people with dysarthria, for the purpose of trying to find out whether we could make any improvements in automatic speech recognition for people with dysarthria. And I had a doctoral student who was using that data set to create better and better speech recognizers for people with dysarthria, and he got a few percentage improvement every year. And then in 2011, this really terrible thing happened. He graduated, and then nothing happened for a couple of years. But then 2 years later, I did one of what might be one of the smartest things I've done in my career, and that is when I first collected the data, I asked the participants if they would be willing to let me share the data with other researchers who were interested in trying their ideas to improve speech recognition for people with dysarthria. And of the 18 people we recruited, 16 said yes. So when Heidi Christensen, who was a doctoral student then at the University of Sheffield, sent me an email to ask if she could use the data, I was able to send her the speech from those 16 people, and she wrote a doctoral thesis that got an additional 10% improvement in the word error rate on those same data. The following year, there was a group at the Chinese University of Hong Kong that did the same thing and got an additional 5% improvement. And then this amazing thing happened. There was this international competition that kind of rose up between different universities across the world, competing to try to find the best possible error rate on our tiny 16-person corpus. And this went on remarkably for 15 years. The best rate so far was published last year in 2023. They finally got it below a 20% average error rate for people with very severe dysarthria, which is a factor of 3 better than what we had initially. And in a way, that's an amazing result, and I was very happy with that. And in a way, it's kind of embarrassing because at the same time that our 16-person corpus is the largest database available for training dysarthric speech recognition, the databases that people are using for training commercial ASR products have gone up to 1,000 speakers, or in some cases 10,000 or 20,000 speakers. And I wanted to find some way to bring dysarthric speech recognition into the 21st century, really into the 2020s. I went to talk to, at a conference, I went to talk to people from a couple of different companies who were there. And one of the people that I talked to put me in touch with a group of accessibility advocates from different companies who had already been discussing exactly this problem. Some of the sponsoring companies had already developed projects to record speech data from people with dysarthria for the purpose of building better products. And they were running into a problem where an individual with Parkinson's might be approached by 3 or 4 different companies, all of them wanting to record speech from the same person. And rather than spending so much time and wasting so much time of the person with Parkinson's, they said, well, why don't we find a university that would be able to create such a data set and curate such a data set and make it available not just to us, but to anybody else who has a good idea for creating better technology. And so they had a call for proposals available. We wrote a proposal saying that we could do it, and they liked the way that we proposed it.
So you mentioned that initial set had 16 people. How many do you have involved in this project now, and what's your target number?
We've had 18 people, we've had 800 people express interest. Of those, 300 people have been approved. The other 500 were judged to have speech that was still too intelligible to really make a difference in the technology. And most of those 300 people have completed the project. We are interested in trying to expand it to 2,000 participants over the course of the next year.
So you're well on your way, but you've got some work ahead of you.
Yes.
That's pretty fascinating. I think especially with the advance of technology and cell phones and voice to text and all of those things, some opportunities are really ripe for the plucking. So you did mention the speech study that you're doing right now. Can you tell us a little bit about, well, I guess first, what is the purpose of this study in more detail, and how are you collecting this data? Is this something that people can do at home, or would they need to go to a facility to submit samples, all of that good stuff?
That's a lot of questions all in one.
Why don't we start with, how are you collecting this data?
So the data are being collected online. This is a web app that has been written here at Beckman Institute. And it's on your own time, in your own house, using your own computer or cell phone or tablet with your own microphone. People log into the website. So when people first sign up, they'll meet with one of our mentors, a speech pathologist who is accustomed to working with people with Parkinson's. And that person will help them make sure that they understand the consent form and make sure that they understand how to use the app. And then after that, it's really up to the participant to participate whenever they feel that it's most comfortable for them. People have been taking anywhere between 2 hours and 10 hours to finish, and that's scheduled over a span of, some people have finished all in one day, but we don't really recommend that. We really recommend that you take about 2 weeks and spread it out over about 2 weeks to finish.
And why do you make that recommendation?
Just because that way people get less tired.
That makes sense.
So with Parkinson's disease, the progression, especially if it's an individual with idiopathic Parkinson's disease, and I want to be careful because when the individual applies to participate in the study, I'm not aware of what kind of variant of Parkinson's disease they have. So it's not going to be clear to me whether it's an idiopathic or young onset or, maybe more of a Lewy body variant or MSA, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to use, if it's okay, idiopathic Parkinson's disease kind of as the prototype. With idiopathic Parkinson's disease, as we kind of all know, some people will live very independently, very successfully for a long time. And there are multiple factors to that, as you're well aware. So within the process of this study, we're not seeing a lot of progression from the beginning of the recording to the end of the recording because the disease process for speech with idiopathic PD just is not quite that rapid. What we do tend to see, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, is because there's so much individual variation depending on that levodopa, rest, that kind of thing, we'll have some folks say, I really can't record first thing in the morning because I just can't quite get out of bed to record, that kind of thing. So we do see that variation throughout the day, but as far as that systematic progression, we're not really seeing that with our typical idiopathic PD patients in the 1 to 2 months that it takes them to record. But who knows? It's possible that, maybe the automatic speech recognition technology will pick up something that, my ears aren't.
I'd be knowing that they do have those speech variations over the course of the day, and we call them off periods. Do you encourage, if someone says, hey, I'm not that great in the morning, so I don't think I should do this in the morning, would your response then be, please actually do it in the morning, or do you leave it up to them?
I would encourage folks to try even when they're on their off periods, as long as it doesn't make them miserable recording. As Mark pointed out, we don't want people to sound like professional audiobook narrators in this situation. We want to hear the variety of speech that we're going to hear throughout the day. Even folks without PD, our speech varies throughout the day. If I've been teaching 8 hours, I'm going to sound a little bit more dysphonic at the end of the day, a little bit more tired. So it's good to get that human variability. We want to make the experience as enjoyable as possible and as user-friendly as possible for our participants. So we don't want them to feel that they are overburdened by having to do a ton of recordings at one time. We want it to be a pace that feels comfortable for the individuals, and also to make it somewhat informal so that the speech patterns really mirror how we use speech casually in day-to-day life.
Yeah, I was curious about that when you mentioned first that 2-week time period, whether you ask people to consider times, for example, with Parkinson's, where they maybe have less control over their speech versus more. Do you find that comes into play?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we may have some participants who have a relatively mild dysarthria when the levodopa is kind of working at its full capacity for that individual. And then maybe when their medication's wearing off, we'll notice that there's a little bit more dysphonia or maybe some more false starts and some repetitions, things like that. So we do see variability within individual users for sure.
Interesting. Well, Mark, can you explain why it's difficult for speech recognition technology to pick up on different people's ways of speaking?
Yes, certainly. So an automatic speech recognizer is a modern automatic speech recognizer is a large neural network. A neural network is it's a program that learns how to behave by its behavior is determined by a lot of numbers that are stored in a file somewhere, and those numbers are adjusted in response to a lot of training data. And what it does with all of these training data is it basically stores examples that it has seen. And then when somebody talks to the speech recognizer, the neural network looks through its large database of stored examples or abstracted examples in order to find the most similar thing that it has ever heard. And whatever it finds that's similar to the voice that it's hearing, it chooses the transcription for that thing that it heard in the past, and it plugs that transcription into the output of the speech recognizer. And there's sort of a trade-off between trying to match the closest example that it's previously heard versus trying to generate a string of text that actually makes some sense as an English string of text. And those two criteria are kind of balanced by the algorithm. Basically, it trades off one against the other in order to try to find what seems to be the most plausible output in response to the audio that it hears. Now, this becomes a problem if the only audio that it's ever heard are audiobook narrators, for example. That example is not chosen at random. Actually, the largest training database that's available for most speech recognizers is curated from LibriVox.org, which is a site online where people can go to record audiobooks that they really love, to record books that they really love, so that other people can download free audiobook recordings and listen to them in their cars. And because some of these people are professional audiobook narrators, almost all of them are fairly fluent in either American or British English. And so we don't get examples of voices that have dysarthria or dysphonia. And so that's
So
really
essentially
the problem.
Sorry to cut you off.
I was just saying that's one of the problems that we're trying to solve with the Speech Accessibility Project, is to provide a lot of training examples of voices with dysarthria or dysphonia that people training speech recognizers can use in order so that the recognizer will then be able to understand such voices.
So essentially the AI is learning from the most precise and most clarified version of English that we've got out there.
Yes.
Do you find that the voice assistive technology has trouble with accents as well?
Yes.
Interesting. And Clarion, how would the Speech Accessibility Project help people with Parkinson's or with any speech impediments?
Sure. So the Speech Accessibility Project, in my mind, has the potential to help decrease that social isolation and withdrawal that we often see with individuals with PD or other diagnoses, and also empower them. So I look at it from the standpoint of, one, potentially increasing safety. So putting people in a position where they can advocate for their own medical needs by being able to, via phone or other technology, make their own medical appointments, order their medication, book their therapy appointments, and so on and so forth, but also vocation. So increase independence, letting people pursue their leisure activities or their professions for longer, and then also just increase quality of life in general, from the standpoint of being able to have, being able to communicate with your grandkids more successfully because you've got this new means in order to make that successful. So those are all very, lofty examples to think through, but just as a very salient one that I was thinking about is, so last week I was paying a bill via the telephone. Nobody likes paying bills at all, but at the same time, I was paying this bill over the telephone. It took me about 120 seconds to do so. It was all through, voice recognition technology, and I had no problems with it whatsoever. We need to improve things so that it is more equitable, so that the person with PD or other disabilities doesn't have to have additional barriers to doing these activities in daily living, because the person with PD or cerebral palsy or what have you is not going to have that same privilege that I have paying a bill, taking 120 seconds to do it over the phone,
Yeah. I mean, that's such a perfect example also of the snowball effect that can really derail people, where if they can't pay that bill over the phone, they might get frustrated, hang up the call, forget about the bill, get a late fee. If they are living on a fixed income, which many seniors are, that late fee or having their service cut off might become an insurmountable obstacle that actually does impact their quality of life beyond just the frustration of not being able to pay that bill. Another thing you brought up, which I think is really interesting and comes back to where we started this conversation, is that vocational element. So yes, right now, the majority of people diagnosed with Parkinson's are over the age of 60. And by virtue of that, many of them are past their careers and their active vocational portion of life. But we are seeing the number of young people with Parkinson's is increasing. They are still in the working period of their life, and they don't want to leave the workforce, and they don't want to necessarily go on disability. They want to still have the ability to build their careers. So I think that's such a profound reason behind this project. I'm really glad you brought that up. So how can our audience participate in the project?
I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to speak over you. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say they just sign up online. Go to saa.beckman.illinois.edu and create an account for yourself. You'll be invited to create an account and a password and enter your name and contact information. And then one of our mentors, who are speech pathologists working with the project, will then reach out to you by telephone or by email to try to schedule a meeting when they can explain the consent form to you and show you how the app works. And then once you've finished that first half-hour meeting, you're free to log in anytime you want to and record speech on your own device in your own home whenever you want to.
And are there
And
any limitations or requirements?
this is also, I want to mention that this is a paid volunteer opportunity. So we want to respect the time and talents of our participants. And so participants that participate in the project get an Amazon e-code for every 200 speech samples that they provide. They'll get a e-code for $60 for a total of up to 180, depending on if they finish all 600 of the prompts or not. And then we also want this to be an event that, or a project that families can potentially participate in. And so if the person might be a little bit more progressed in their Parkinson's disease, or they need a little bit more assistance, there's also the opportunity for caregivers, for a caregiver to assist with the project, and they will be compensated up to $90 for that paid volunteer opportunity. And I think you asked about limitations. Individuals need a laptop or a tablet. Cell phones are possible, but they don't work quite as easily as the laptop or tablet or desktop. And the device also needs to have a working microphone. Mark, I'm sure I'm missing something as far as exclusion criteria and limitations.
Well, unfortunately, we're not able to take participants from Illinois, Washington, or Texas right now. And the reason is that there are data privacy laws in those states that make it difficult to accomplish the goals of the project. In the state of Illinois, for example, the data privacy law allows a participant to give a company the right to use their data for machine learning for up to 3 years. And then at the end of 3 years, the company would have to go back to the participant to ask for continued consent. And we decided that that was too much of an obstacle to the machine learning goals that this project is trying to accomplish. So we're unfortunately not able to take people from our own state. The other inclusion criteria that I would recommend, I mean, we invite anybody with Parkinson's to sign up. We are especially looking for people who think that they can't talk anymore, who think that their voices are just they can't be heard by even their family members and friends, and so they just imagine that there's nobody who wants to listen to them. Those are the people that we most want to sign up. So if you think that you can't speak and that therefore we wouldn't be interested, please be assured that no, you're exactly the person that we really, really would like to participate in this, because we believe that even if friends and family can no longer understand you, your machines should still be able to understand you and should encourage you to continue speaking and continue communicating.
That's very profound. That, of course, is a problem with Parkinson's, especially as people get farther along. So we will be sure to emphasize that for our constituents, that if you think you are beyond being understood, you are the perfect person for this study. And I think what's so amazing about this also is that they are getting compensation for a study that ultimately is in service to the community. So kudos on that one. I'm curious, how does your research help technology developers like Apple, Microsoft, and Google? And basically, how does this all work on the final end? Yeah,
there are at least 3 different ways in which this research project directly feeds into the advancement of technology. At the 5 sponsoring companies are Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, and Microsoft. The first way is simply data, that we are annotating the data at the university, and every waveform is listened to by a human being who checks to if what you said is not what was in the text of the prompt, then we change the text so that it matches what you said, so that the machine learning algorithms will get a chance to match the text correctly with the waveform. If by accident you insert any personally identifying information into the waveform, we zero that out so that it won't be distributed to any other researchers anywhere else. And then we make those anonymized audio and transcript files available to first of all to those 5 companies for training the speech recognition products that each of those companies produce. Second, after a 6-month window, we're encouraged by our sponsoring companies to distribute the data to any other university or company that's able to sign a data use agreement guaranteeing the privacy of the participants. And I can go into some of the privacy guarantees that they have to agree to if you like. But basically, if a university anywhere has an idea for how to make speech recognition work better for people with Parkinson's, they send us a 1-page summary saying, here's my idea, can I use the data? And then we ask them to sign the data use agreement, and then they can download the data and use it to test an idea to improve the technology.
So it's almost open source, but with privacy clauses as well.
Exactly. It's as open source as we could make it while still preserving privacy.
So well said. How long does a project like this take before the public starts to see the impact?
It varies a lot. Probably it could be as short as 3 months or as long as 3 or 4 years. I would say that maybe the most typical course might be about 18 months. And that consists of the following 2 stages. First, all of the people that we're working with at the 5 sponsoring companies and at other companies and universities are researchers studying automatic speech recognition. And so first, if they have an idea for how to improve speech recognition for people with Parkinson's, they test that idea using these data, and most often they write a paper about it and submit the paper for publication. Even if they're at one of these companies, that's usually the first step. And usually that paper is taken internally in the company as a kind of proof of concept. They take that paper and they show that to their managers and to the people who are making financial decisions, and they say, look, this data can really help us to build better technology for people with Parkinson's. Can we now incorporate it into our mainstream product? And the managers will go ahead and say, yes, this sounds like a good idea. Please run all of the unit tests to make sure that this will work, and then get it into the product.
Yeah, so look at this amazing paper. Let's get going.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything that you think we didn't cover that you would like to mention to our audience?
We're still eager for volunteers, so we encourage folks to sign up at saa.beckman.illinois.edu. That's S as in Sam, aa.beckman.illinois.edu. We also have a phone number where participants can reach out to a mentor if they want to use a telephone rather than do it directly through the internet for that initial connection. And then if there are caregivers listening or other healthcare professionals like myself, we also have a mailing list so that they can be apprised of what's going on in the speech accessibility project world.
Amazing. My final question was going to be, where can they connect one more time? But you just covered that, and we will be sure to put that link in the description under this video. Okay. So just a reminder, you can find other resources and the latest Parkinson's news on our website. If you didn't know, the Wellness Village is a virtual resource directory on our website where you can access resources that you might not know about that can help improve your quality of life as you navigate Parkinson's, both as a person with Parkinson's and a caregiver. Clarion, Dr. Mark, thank you for joining us on this episode of Things to Know Right Now, and thank you for sharing all this wonderful information.
Thank you so much for having us.
So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can get the latest information on what you need to know about Parkinson's. We are here to serve and to help you navigate life with Parkinson's, and you are not alone. So we will see you next time.